Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, a world where robots walk among us, mimicking our every move. The Chinese Communist Party is trying to make that happen by mass-producing humanoid robots. But as China pushes forward, U.S. officials are raising red flags. Kamala Harris just announced her running mate, Governor Tim Walz. Where does he stand on China? The Minnesota governor has worked to raise awareness about China's human rights issues dating back to the 1989 Tiananmen Massacre.
I'm certainly honored to have been there and to see the spirit of the Chinese people about trying to, very proud of their country, but understanding that freedom needs to shine.
A remote Australian island has caught the U.S. military's interest. The U.S. wants to build its presence there as part of the plan to combat China. And besides TikTok, another popular U.S. app called Talkie is also setting off alarms over its Chinese parent company. More on how the China-developed AI app is making waves in America. Robots capable of mimicking human behavior. Mass-producing humanoid robots has long been a priority for the Chinese Communist Party. As the regime vows to scale up production, U.S. officials are sounding the alarm. Equipped with 4 limbs and a head, engineers said these Chinese-made robots go beyond just mimicking human movements. They're also capable of expressing emotions like joy, happiness, anger, and sadness. Today, Chinese tech firms are hoping to push their products into the global market. That's as Beijing vows to achieve mass production of humanoid robots by 2025 and world-class performance by 2027. Concerns over the communist regime's robotic ambitions are mounting in Congress. The New York Post reported a growing support among lawmakers for a potential ban. Chairman of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, John Molinar, said in a statement to NTD, they are not science fiction. He added China's robot manufacturing will follow Beijing's usual playbook, from taking state subsidies to flooding foreign markets with cheap products to advancing the interests of the Communist Party state. Molinar isn't the only congressman sounding the alarm. At an event in June, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise said China is looking to, quote, put American competitors out of business and make Americans reliant on CCP-controlled humanoid robots. He called the prospect suicidal without policy action from Washington. Some say they foresee a nightmare scenario. Jacob Helberg, a member of the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, said China's humanoid technology has been developing at a mind-boggling speed. He predicted that going forward, the robots could be leveraged to spy on foreign countries, wreak havoc on critical infrastructure, and even cause physical harm to Americans. An advanced Chinese robot can run up to 11 miles per hour and is capable of carrying boxes. Should the U.S. ban China's humanoid robots, and what's so dangerous about them? Some experts warn that allowing robots made by Beijing-backed firms could lead to espionage, surveillance, and even physical attacks in the U.S. To discuss, we spoke with Arthur Herman, senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. Arthur Herman, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
It's good to be back.
And to begin, the New York Post is reporting that China has developed humanoid robots that can carry boxes, run, and also absorb punches. First, what is your reaction to all of this?
What makes all of this possible is China's use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, for what I will call industrial purposes. In other words, not using it in order to generate poems or term papers or to do, just image recognition and the kinds of things that we're familiar with. And this is really hardcore industrial AI that's used to enhance manufacturing, that's used to enhance machines that do things, that carry stuff, or that transport goods and technology. So what we're seeing is another example of where China has used artificial intelligence, machine learning, and have moved it into a sector that we're just barely beginning to become aware of how important it really is. And that's really what these humanoid robots represent. It's it's a means by which AI now can reach out and touch and physically move things or produce things in ways that are, I would say, have gone beyond just the realm of science fiction, but have really moved into the realm of China's next big move as the world's leading industrial power.
Now, expanding on that in a bit, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise is calling this a national security threat to the U.S., saying, it sounds like sci-fi, but humanoid robots are real and very concerning coming from China. Given that, should the U.S. ban these types of humanoid robots from China?
Well, I think that's probably a good idea. But we've got a couple of different invasions going on here, don't we, Tiffany? Because, we do have this threat of Chinese humanoid robots, but we also have Chinese humans who have come across the border in the last 3 years, an estimated 33,000 of them. Those are real people. Those are Chinese males, many of them males of military age, who have just managed to find their way across the border and have somehow infiltrated themselves into our society. That's the area I think that we have to worry about a lot more right now than we do about humanoid robots taking over facilities. There's another aspect of this too about robotics, Chinese robotics and AI, and where the Chinese government may be able to use this to their advantage in nefarious ways. And that was touched on, I think, in another article that also came out, which was about the threat of other kinds of Chinese robotic devices, like vacuum cleaners, like drones, in which are constantly observing and gathering data about us and about our families and about our environment, how much of a threat they might possibly pose here. So humanoid robots, it's not science fiction. It's real. It could happen. The Chinese Army, People's Liberation Army, being able to use humanoid robots as suicide troops, let's say, advancing on the battlefield, and that's a real scenario. That's definitely a future scenario. But the real issue here, Tiffany, and this is what you and I have talked about many times, the real issue is understanding the possibilities for artificial intelligence and machine learning and what it can do in terms of national security, in terms of economic security. This is, I think, the most important concern. Humanoid robots, that's tip of the iceberg. That's just one symptom of what a much deeper drive that China's involved in that we are way behind on in both understanding and implementing in our own country.
Arthur Herman, thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
The Democratic National Convention is less than 2 weeks away, and the party's presumptive presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, announced her choice for vice president on Tuesday, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. We take a closer look at his stance on China. Walz served as a House representative from Minnesota before becoming governor. He was a member of the Congressional Executive Commission on China from 2007 to 2014. The body exclusively focuses on China's human rights issues. Walz has been calling on the Chinese regime to end human rights violations, particularly the suppression of pro-democracy groups, Hong Kongers, the Tibetan people, and the Falun Gong faith group. To that end, he co-signed several resolutions. In 2015, Walz signed a resolution condemning the Chinese Communist Party's organ harvesting. Walz's connections with China dates back to 1989. He got a chance to teach in high schools in China that year, the same year the biggest pro-democracy demonstration in China's modern history broke out. The incident deeply influenced his stance on China in the years to come.
It felt like freedom was sweeping the world, and it was just such an optimistic feeling. And I remember waking up and seeing the news on June 4th that the unthinkable had happened. There was a lot of decisions whether many of my colleagues decided to go home and not to go on. I felt it was more important than ever to go, to make sure that story was told and to let Chinese the Chinese people know we were standing there. We were with them. It was an amazing thing to watch as the goddess of democracy rose, and it was very powerful. And I'm certainly honored to have been there and to see the spirit of the Chinese people about trying to, very proud of their country, but understanding that freedom needs to shine. So I'm here today as a representative of the people of Minnesota, but as a representative of the U.S. government. We stand with freedom fighters everywhere, and we need to make that clear.
In 2016, he met with the Dalai Lama, the Tibetan spiritual leader, as Governor Walz also spearheaded a plan for universal free school meals and pushed for 100% carbon-free electricity in the state by 2040. He also signed a bill to enshrine abortion access into state law. A Queens-based Chinese scholar was convicted in Brooklyn federal court on Tuesday. Xujin Wang was found guilty of spying for the Chinese Communist Party and gathering information on Chinese dissidents. His targets included Hong Kong pro-democracy activists, Taiwanese independence supporters, and Uyghur and Tibetan activists. The jury also convicted Wang of lying to federal officers about the scheme. Wang faces up to 25 years in prison. He'll be sentenced on January 9th. The U.S. military is eyeing a remote Australian island to build its presence on as part of the plan to combat China. The island sits close to a choke point for Chinese oil shipments in the Indian Ocean. Joining us now is NTD's Flora Hua. Flora, tell us more.
Yes, Tiff. The Australian Defence Ministry sees these islands, named the Cocos Islands, as key to monitoring maritime activities in the Indian Ocean, especially in the face of China's rising submarine activity. These islands sit over 1,800 miles west of the Australian mainland, but are closer to the Strait of Malacca. The strait is where half of China's oil shipments must pass through. Besides that, the director of Melbourne-based think tank, the Australia-India Institute, told the U.S. Congress last year that Cocos Islands would be critical geography for the U.S. in deterring China from invading Taiwan. 2 months ago, the U.S. Navy published a construction tender listing the Cocos Islands as a possible project location.
Flora, thanks for that. The White House says China will begin adding controls and regulation to the production of 3 chemicals used to make illicit fentanyl. The acting National Security Council spokesperson said in a statement, it's the 3rd such action since the U.S. and China resumed bilateral counter-narcotics cooperation in November 2023. Illicit fentanyl remains a potent issue for the Biden administration. Fentanyl overdoses have surged to become the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. Over 107,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2023. A U.S. congressional committee said in April that the Chinese Communist regime was directly subsidizing production of illicit fentanyl precursors. The substances were then sold abroad, fueling the U.S. opioid crisis. A delegation of senior Chinese officials met Biden administration officials last Wednesday to discuss the fentanyl issue. Sharpie pen maker Newell Brands is pulling its supply chains out of China. That's to counter uncertainty surrounding the upcoming November election.
The Sharpie pen maker relocated manufacturing for its writing business to Tennessee after leaving China and is now moving its kitchen appliance supply chain out of China as well. Newell CEO Chris Peterson said the company's decision was specifically made in reaction to Trump's China policy. Trump has pledged to further hike tariffs on China-made products during his election campaigns. Democrats are also discussing keeping or even expanding Trump-era tariffs. Peterson said it would be too late to move supply chains on a real-time basis. The pen maker is expected to keep less than 10% of production in China for its U.S. businesses by the end of the year. That proportion has already dropped to 15% this year, down from 35% 5 years ago.
Just as TikTok is faced with a ban in the U.S., another Chinese-made entertainment app has gained popularity among young Americans, and it's drawn in millions of American users within just 1 year. Talkie is a new chatbot app. With it, users can have AI-generated conversations with digital lookalikes of celebrities, such as Elon Musk, Taylor Swift, or Donald Trump. It was launched last year by a company based in Singapore, but its parent company is Shanghai-based tech company Minimax. Talkie's rising popularity comes after Washington signed a bill to oust TikTok from U.S. app stores unless its Chinese parent ByteDance sells the app. Experts believe Talkie is Beijing's alternative to TikTok, with the goal of influencing American society, especially young people. Talkie has about 11 million active users around the world. More than half are in the United States. TikTok and its Chinese parent company ByteDance are now faced with a lawsuit by the Justice Department for violating children's privacy laws. Last year, in a House hearing, TikTok was accused of promoting suicide, self-harm, and eating disorders to children. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. More pushback against Chinese-owned video platform TikTok, and now the pressure is coming from 2 fronts. A social media professor explains what exactly is fueling global pressure against the app.
It's been a bad week for TikTok, whether it's in the EU or here in the United States.
China is conducting military drills with 2 African countries, thousands of miles from its own soil. It's part of decades of effort the communist country has poured into the continent. What's behind it? The debt-ridden Chinese developer Evergrande dealt yet another blow. A court ruling ordered bankruptcy for part of its electric vehicle business. More on the company's struggle after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.